A blizzard buries Denver. In a frozen drainage tunnel, a German Shepherd canine named Titan finds a silent 5-year-old boy. His handler, Officer Eli, a grieving father who buried his son 3 years ago, stops cold. The child has an impossible scar, one Eli last saw in a casket. Behind a trusted partner's friendly smile is a lie that covers a fiery murder. His wife, who he thought was ashes, is actually a ghost fighting from the shadows. And one small drawing from the silent boy holds the memory that will expose the killer wearing the same badge. What happens next will unravel a conspiracy that tears a precinct apart. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. If you believe no child or animal should ever face fear alone, hit subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs hope. Denver was being entombed. The city, usually a gateway to the majestic Rockies, felt like a cage of steel gray and biting wind. A vicious, historic blizzard had descended upon the mile-high city, smothering the streets in a silent, suffocating shroud of white. Snow fell not in gentle flakes, but in horizontal sheets, a relentless assault that blurred the lines between the sidewalks and the roads, erasing the world Eli Thorne once knew. For Officer Elias Eli Thorne, the biting cold outside was merely a reflection of the permanent winter settled deep within his soul. He drove his K-9 patrol unit slowly through the industrial district near the Platte River, the blue and red lights of his SUV casting weak, swirling colors against the blank canvas of the warehouses. The streets were dead. No one was out. No one, except the ghosts that always rode with him. Tonight, the ghosts were louder. Tonight marked exactly 3 years since the explosion. 3 years since the blinding flash of fire had torn his world apart, claiming his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old son, Cody. Eli, now 35, looked older than his years. The angular, sharp features of his youth had been hardened by grief, his jaw perpetually tight beneath a layer of dark, unkempt stubble. His green eyes, once quick to laugh, were now haunted, carrying a permanent exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure. He was a good cop, methodical, detached, and dedicated, but he moved through life like a man functioning on autopilot, his heart and soul buried in that cemetery plot alongside his family. Beside him, shifting anxiously in the passenger seat, was the only living thing that tethered him to the present, Titan. A 4-year-old German Shepherd, Titan was a magnificent K-9, his sable coat thick and healthy, his amber eyes missing nothing. He was Eli's partner, a silent, intuitive presence who understood the deep well of sadness in his handler better than any human colleague. Titan was all business on duty, but he was also the only reason Eli bothered to get out of bed most mornings. The radio crackled with mundane calls, fender benders, frozen pipes, but this sector, a forgotten grid of chain-link fences and dormant factories, was utterly silent. Eli navigated the patrol unit down a dead-end access road, the snowdrifts piling high against the concrete foundations. Suddenly, Titan broke the silence. It started not with a bark, but a low, guttural whine from deep in his chest. His head snapped to the right, his ears pinned forward, his entire body going rigid. "What is it, Ty?" Eli murmured, slowing the SUV. "Just a coyote, buddy. Nothing's out here." But Titan escalated. He let out a sharp, percussive huff, then another, scratching at the reinforced door panel. He wasn't tracking an animal. This was his human scent alert, but it was frantic. Okay, I hear you," Eli sighed, pulling the vehicle to a stop. The wind howled, rocking the SUV as he killed the engine. Though, silence that rushed in was oppressive. Eli flipped on his external spotlight, the beam cutting a bright cone through the driving snow, illuminating nothing but a massive drift piled against the concrete embankment of an overpass. Titan, however, was now barking, deep, insistent commands. "Show me," Eli said, his training taking over. He opened his door, and the Arctic blast hit him like a physical blow. Titan bounded out, immediately sinking chest deep into the powder, but plowing forward with relentless determination, his barks echoing strangely against the concrete. Eli followed, his heavy tactical boots crunching as he pulled his flashlight from his belt. "Titan, heel!" he commanded, but the dog ignored him. The shepherd was digging furiously at the wall of snow, pulling Eli toward a spot that seemed insignificant, a concrete maw half buried by the blizzard. It was a drainage tunnel, a large concrete culvert designed to handle storm runoff, and it was almost completely sealed by the snowdrift. Titan was clawing at the entrance, whining desperately. A spike of adrenaline cut through Eli's numbed detachment. Titan smelled someone. Here. Denver PD, Eli shouted into the black opening, his voice swallowed by the wind. Anyone in there? He pulled his service weapon, his movements automatic, as he crouched by the opening. Titan was now trying to squeeze past the snow barrier. Eli pushed the snow away, flashlight beam leading, and peered into the oppressive darkness. The tunnel was massive, dark, and smelled of frozen earth and mildew. His light beam lanced through the black, catching on something 20 feet inside. It wasn't an animal, it was a shape. 2 shapes. Police, show me your hands, he yelled. The shapes didn't move. Eli holstered his weapon, realizing this wasn't a threat. It was a recovery. He squeezed past the snowdrift, Titan pushing protectively ahead of him, and waded through the shallow, icy water at the tunnel's bottom. The light found them. An elderly man, his skin a terrifying shade of blue-gray, was slumped against the curved concrete wall. He was dressed in a threadbare coat, completely inadequate for the weather. This was Alistair Finch, though Eli didn't know his name. He was just a ghost, his white hair matted with ice, his body still, and cradled protectively in his arms, bundled in an oversized jacket, was a child, a small boy, perhaps 5 years old, his eyes wide and vacant with terror, shivering so violently his teeth chattered. "Oh, God," Eli whispered. He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is 7K9. I have 2 victims, severe hypothermia, possible code F. Inside the drainage tunnel, off 49th and Industrial. Need an ambulance, code 3, now!" Titan immediately moved to the child, nudging the boy's hand with his cold nose, licking his face in a gentle, reassuring gesture. The boy didn't react, just stared, paralyzed. "It's okay, son. We're getting you out of here," Eli said, his voice softer than he'd intended. He checked the old man's pulse. It was faint, thready, but there. He turned his attention to the boy. "I've got you. You're safe." Eli gently worked the child free from the unconscious man's frozen grip. The boy was terrifyingly light. Eli scooped him up, wrapping the small frame inside his own heavy-duty winter coat, trying to shield him from the wind as he backed out of the tunnel. "He's okay, Ty. Watch the man," he commanded. Titan stayed, standing guard over Alistair. Eli rushed the child to the warmth of the running SUV, the flashing lights painting the scene in surreal strokes of red and blue. He placed the boy in the passenger seat, cranking the heat. "You're okay, kid. You're okay." The boy just stared, silent. Eli needed to check him for immediate injuries. He gently pulled back the hood of the oversized jacket, which was damp and stiff with ice. The boy's dark hair was matted to his forehead. Eli's flashlight beam slid across the child's pale, dirty cheek, checking his pupils. And then it stopped. The beam froze, centered on a small patch of skin just beneath the lobe of the boy's left ear. Eli's breath hitched. His heart, which he thought had died 3 years ago, suddenly hammered against his ribs with painful, impossible force. It was a scar, a tiny, perfect crescent-shaped scar. The world dissolved. Eli wasn't in a snowstorm. He was in his old backyard, sunlight streaming through the trees. He saw Sarah, his wife, so vibrant, so alive, tall and slender, with her waterfall of blonde hair and skin that always smelled like vanilla. Gasp as their 18-month-old son, Cody, tumbled awkwardly off the bottom porch step onto the grass. He remembered laughing as he picked Cody up, checking the small scrape. "He's tough, Sarah," he had said, kissing the spot. That tiny scrape had healed into this exact mark. A mark Eli had kissed goodnight 1,000 times. A mark he had last seen on a cold, still face in a morgue. A mark that was impossible. He stared at the terrified child in his patrol car, who was now staring back at him. The storm, the radio, the cold, it all vanished. There was only the scar. "Cody," Eli whispered, the name tearing from his throat like a prayer he'd forgotten how to speak. The world dissolved into a piercing scream of sirens. Eli drove his K9 unit on pure muscle memory, following the ambulance as it cut a path through the blinding blizzard. His hands were locked on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, but he felt nothing. Not the cold, not the fatigue. His entire consciousness had collapsed into the single, impossible image of the crescent-shaped scar beneath the boy's ear. Cody. The name was a blasphemy, a prayer, and a curse all at once. He had buried Cody. He had carried the small, light casket. He had shoveled frozen earth onto it. Yet, the child in that ambulance, the silent, terrified boy found in a frozen concrete tube, wore his son's mark. In the passenger seat, Titan sat rigid, whining softly, sensing the fractured state of his handler. Eli hadn't just found a victim, he had found a ghost, and the realization threatened to shatter the fragile truce he'd made with his own sanity. Denver General Hospital was a beacon of chaos in the storm. The emergency bay was overflowing with the night's casualties: car accidents, frostbite, the homeless brought in from the cold. Nurses and doctors moved with practiced, urgent efficiency. Eli carried the boy inside, the child's small, cold body still wrapped in his tactical coat. John Doe, approximate age 5, severe hypothermia, non-responsive, a triage nurse called out, and the boy was immediately swept from Eli's arms onto a gurney and wheeled behind the double doors of the trauma unit. Moments later, Alistair Finch was rushed in, his condition far more critical. Eli was left standing alone in the sterile brightness of the hallway, dripping melted snow onto the polished linoleum, his heart hammering a frantic, broken rhythm. He was a cop. He was supposed to secure the scene, file a report, but he was frozen, a man watching his own life split in two. He was still standing there, staring at the doors the boy had disappeared behind, when heavy footsteps approached. "Eli, man, you look like you just saw the devil." Eli turned, his gaze slowly focusing. It was Detective Marcus Rourke. Rourke was a few years older than Eli, maybe 45, with a stocky, powerful build that filled out his cheap suit. He had a thick neck and a weathered face that seemed to be permanently fixed in a seen-it-all grin. He was a cop's cop, quick with a joke, quicker to buy around, and universally liked in the precinct. But his eyes, dark and intelligent, were always assessing, always calculating, even when he smiled. "Heard the call come over," Rourke said, clapping a heavy hand on Eli's shoulder. "Welfare check in this blizzard? Sounded nasty. Figured I'd swing by, make sure you weren't stuck in a drift." The gesture seemed friendly, but Eli felt a sudden, irrational chill that had nothing to do with the snow melting on his collar. A detective swinging by a patrolman's welfare check was unusual. "It was Titan," Eli said, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "He found them. In a drainage tunnel." Rourke's smile tightened just a fraction. "Found who?" Dispatch was garbled. "An old man and a kid," Eli said, watching Rourke's face. "A little boy." "A kid? Jesus," Rourke whistled, shaking his head. "Out here, in this, parents must be frantic. Any ID? No, he's not talking." "Trauma, probably," Rourke said, his expression one of pure sympathy. "You did good, Eli, bringing them in. Don't let it get to you. You always took the kid cases too hard, especially after." The words were supportive, a kind acknowledgement of Eli's past, but they landed like a sharp probe, a test. Rourke was watching him intently, those smiling eyes gauging his reaction. Before Eli could respond, a doctor in blue scrubs approached him. "Officer Thorne?" She was a woman in her 30s, sharp and efficient, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, and eyes that held the exhaustion of a 24-hour shift. Her name tag read, Dr. Eva Ramirez. "I can update you on the boy. The man, Mr. Finch, is stabilized but unconscious." "How is he? The boy?" Eli asked, his throat tight. "He's lucky you found him. Mild hypothermia, malnutrition, but his vitals are strong. He'll be fine, physically," Dr. Ramirez said. "The issue is psychological. He's completely nonverbal. Not a word, not a sound. We're diagnosing it as trauma-induced selective mutism. Did you find a name? Anything?" "Just this." She held up a small, plastic-bagged item. It was a laminated piece of cardstock, like a library card, clearly written by an adult hand. It just said, "My name is Leo. I do not talk. We're calling him Leo for now." Eli stared at the card. Leo, not Cody. He felt a dizzying wave of relief and profound disappointment. Of course it wasn't him. It was a coincidence. A scar. He was projecting his grief onto a random lost child. Can I see him?" Eli asked, the cop in him needing to see the case through. Dr. Ramirez hesitated, then nodded. "He's in pediatric observation. Room 212. He's awake." Eli walked down the quiet hallway, his boots silent on the floor. He paused at the door of his unit, opened it, and gave the quiet command. Titan, sensing the shift, followed him. It was against all protocol, but Eli didn't care. He entered the small, dimly lit room. The boy, Leo, was sitting up in an oversized hospital gown, his small, pale face cleaned of the tunnel's grime. He was staring at the blank television screen on the wall, his eyes vacant. "Leo," Eli said softly. The boy didn't move. He didn't even blink. Eli felt the fragile hope shatter. This was just another broken kid. Then, Titan, who had been standing patiently at Eli's side, let out a soft, low whine. The dog moved forward, ignoring Eli, and rested his great head gently on the edge of the hospital bed, his warm amber eyes fixed on the child. The boy's head snapped toward the dog. His eyes, so dull moments before, suddenly focused. He stared at Titan, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps just curiosity. Slowly, hesitantly, the boy's small hand reached out and, trembling, rested on the dog's head. He began to stroke Titan's fur, his fingers curling into the thick ruff. It was the first voluntary connection he had made with any living thing since his arrival. Eli watched, his breath caught in his chest. The scar was real. And now, this. An hour later, Alistair Finch was awake. Eli entered the man's room, leaving Titan with Leo under the watch of a surprised but consenting nurse. Alistair looked impossibly frail against the white pillows, his eyes, watery and blue, darting around nervously. "Leo," he rasped, his voice thin. "Is the boy safe?" "He's safe. He's with my partner," Eli said, pulling up a chair. Mr. Finch, I'm Officer Thorne. I need you to tell me what happened, not just tonight. Where did you find that boy?" Alistair's eyes filled with tears, and the story tumbled out, a confession held back for 3 agonizing years. He was a retired teacher. 3 years ago, he was at the downtown bus depot, waiting for a crosstown connection, when the world exploded. "The gas main explosion," he whispered, "the one that killed all those people." In the chaos, the smoke, and the sirens, he had seen him. A little boy, wandering alone, covered in soot, crying. I went to help him," Alistair said. "But then I saw him." "Him? Who?" "A man. A big man, in a dark suit. He wasn't a cop, he wasn't a firefighter, he was just searching, angrily. He saw the boy, and he started walking toward him, and I knew, officer. I knew he meant to harm that child." Eli's blood turned to ice. "What did you do?" "I did what I had to do. I grabbed Leo. I named him Leo later. I ran to my car, and I just drove. I never looked back. I thought they were after him. I raised him as my grandson. We kept moving, lived on my pension. He never spoke again, not after that day." "And tonight," Eli pressed, his voice barely a whisper. "The heater in our apartment broke. We were freezing. I was trying to get us to a shelter, but the storm, we got lost. We took shelter in that tunnel." Alistair's face crumpled. "But I saw him again, officer. This morning. The man from the bus station. He was parked across from our building, watching us. That's why we ran." "This man," Eli said, his voice dangerously quiet. "What did he look like?" Alistair's eyes squeezed shut, recalling the image. Stocky, dark hair. He had a way of smiling, but his eyes were cold, like a shark. Eli stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. He saw Marcus Rourke's face, his easy grin, his assessing, cold eyes. "Figured I'd swing by." He hadn't been checking on Eli. He had been hunting. Rourke knew Alistair and the boy were on the run in the blizzard, and he was using the police net to find them before they could escape. The concerned partner, who had warned him not to take the kid cases too hard, was the very man Alistair had been hiding from. Eli walked to the window, looking down at the swirling snow, but he wasn't seeing the storm. He was seeing the explosion, the fire, and Rourke's face, smiling. Eli Thorne walked out of Alistair Finch's room, but he was no longer the same man who had entered the hospital. The dense fog of grief that had shrouded his existence for 3 years was gone, burned away by a sudden, terrifying, and ice-cold clarity. Marcus Rourke, his partner. The man who joked about bad coffee, the man who had attended Sarah and Cody's funeral, the man who had clapped him on the shoulder just 30 minutes ago, was the shark. He wasn't just involved in the explosion, he was the architect of its cover-up, and now he was here to tie up the last loose end. Alistair's description of the shark-eyed man was a branding iron to Eli's brain, searing Rourke's smiling, calculating face onto the image of the hunter. Eli's movements became deliberate, precise. He was no longer a mourner, he was a hunter too. His first priority was the boy, his second was proof. He needed to get back to room 212. He intercepted Dr. Ramirez at the nurse's station, his voice dropping into the low, calm register of absolute authority. "Doctor, the victim's from the tunnel. The man, Alistair Finch, his story indicates a severe domestic threat. The man he's fleeing is dangerous and may be actively searching for them. I need them moved to a secure room, unlisted, under a John Doe protocol. No visitors without my direct authorization." Dr. Ramirez, sensing the immediate shift from concerned officer to tactical guardian, nodded curtly. "I'll move them to the fourth-floor annex. It's access controlled. I'll handle it personally." Eli nodded. "Thank you. I'm going to check on the boy one last time before I post an officer outside." He walked back to room 212, his footsteps silent. He pushed the door open quietly. The nurse who had been watching Leo was gone, likely attending to another patient. The room was bathed in the dim glow of a single monitor. What Eli saw stopped his heart. Titan, his highly trained, disciplined K9 partner, had broken protocol in the most profound way imaginable. He was not on the floor. He was partially on the bed. The great dog had curled his body alongside the small child, his head resting on his massive paws, his amber eyes fixed on the door, a silent, furry sentinel. And Leo, Cody, was fast asleep, his small, pale hand no longer trembling, but buried deep in the thick, warm fur of Titan's ruff. The boy, who had been catatonic with terror, had found his anchor. Titan, who was trained to detect explosives and track fugitives, had recognized this child on a level that transcended training. He recognized family. This unspoken, instinctive bond was more damning than the scar. It was the proof Eli's soul needed, even as his mind scrambled for the science. Eli moved forward, his throat tight. Titan's tail gave a single, slow thump on the mattress, but he didn't move his head from his guard post. The boy didn't stir. Eli looked at the small, perfect face, the dark lashes resting on pale cheeks, and the rage he felt toward Rourke was so potent it was acidic. "You took him. You let me bury him." Eli's gaze fell to the white hospital pillowcase. Dark strands of the boy's hair were stark against the white. His hand, covered by a tactical glove, moved slowly. He needed this. He needed the law, the science, to back up the fire raging in his gut. He carefully plucked 3-4 strands of hair from the pillow, his touch impossibly gentle. He took a sterile gauze pad from the bedside tray, folded the hairs inside it, and slid the small, precious packet into the breast pocket of his uniform, zipped tight against his chest. He stood there for a long moment, watching the dog and the boy. "Watch him, Ty," he whispered, his voice thick. Titan closed his eyes in understanding. Eli left the hospital, stepping back out into the raging blizzard. The world was a vortex of white, but his mind was a sharp, clear instrument. He got into his K9 unit, the engine rumbling to life, the cab filling with warm air. He sat there for a moment, the flashing blue and red lights painting the snow around him. He pulled out his personal cell phone, scrolling to a number he hadn't called in years. "Mike," he said when the line picked up. "It's Thorne." "Yeah, long time. Listen, I'm calling in that favor, the big one. I have a sample, a few hair follicles. I need a priority DNA sequence match run against my own profile. It needs to be completely off the books. No DPD lab, no official channels. I know what I'm asking. Yes, it's life or death. I'll drop it at your private lab's night box in 30. He hung up, his resolve hardening into steel. Now, for the case file. He couldn't go to the precinct. Rourke might be there, watching the duty rosters, watching him. He powered up the tough book laptop mounted in his patrol unit, the screen glowing against the dark interior. He logged into the DPD archive, his fingers flying across the keys. He pulled the file. Case number 3A4491. Incident. Suspected gas main explosion. Location, 44401 Summit View Drive. Victims, Sarah Thorne, F29, Cody Thorne, M2. He scrolled past the official sterile reports, the fire marshal's summary. Catastrophic failure of aging gas infrastructure. The coroner's report. Victims burned beyond visual identification. Dental records used for presumptive ID of Sarah Thorne. Juvenile remains consistent with 2-year-old male. It was all so neat, too neat. He had been too broken by grief to question it then. Now he saw the holes. He bypassed the primary reports and dove into the supplemental files, the digital dumping ground for witness interviews, patrolman notes, and audio files deemed non-essential. He filtered by timeline, looking for anything logged in the first 6 hours of the fire. Most were useless, neighbors reporting the sound, people seeing smoke, and then he found it. Supplemental Witness Statement 11B. Interviewee, Martha Kendall, status disregarded, witness hysterical, conflicting timeline. He clicked the file. It was a patrolman's typed summary of an interview with a transient woman who had been sheltering near his property. The patrolman who filed the report was a rookie, one who had been Rourke's partner at the time. Eli's blood ran cold as he read Martha's words, transcribed and dismissed. She kept saying the car didn't just blow up. She said there were men, 2 men, arguing. She saw a woman with hair like sunlight, victim S. Thorne was blonde, get out of the driver's side. She said the woman was screaming at one of the men. Then the woman pulled a child from the back seat. Witness states the woman gave the child to another person, a lady in a dark coat, and yelled, "Run! Don't stop!" before the first man grabbed her. Witness claims the explosion happened after that. Statement disregarded as witness was intoxicated, and timeline contradicts physical evidence of gas main failure. Eli stopped breathing. Sarah, his Sarah. She hadn't been a passive victim. She had been a warrior. She had fought. She had pulled Cody from that car. She had saved him, handing him off to someone, a third party, seconds before she was, what? Pulled back, murdered? And the entire narrative, the gas main failure that had defined his life for 3 years, was a lie, a fabrication, signed off on and buried by Rourke's own partner to cover a targeted execution. He stared through the windshield at the swirling snow, but he saw only fire and Sarah's face, fighting for their son. The drive home from the lab's night drop was a blur of white and red taillights. The blizzard had not lessened. It had intensified, as if the city itself was trying to bury the truth Eli had just unearthed. He completed his shift in a fugue state, his body running on the autopilot of years of training, but his mind was 30,000 feet above, looking down at the chessboard. He saw the pieces now. Rourke, the Vipers gang, a convenient faceless enemy to pin a targeted assassination on, the rookie partner who disregarded the key witness. Sarah, fighting. Cody, saved by a lady in a dark coat. And Alistair Finch, a simple good man who had inadvertently grabbed the single loose thread and run with it for 3 years. When Eli finally walked into his own home just before dawn, the silence was deafening. This house, once a sanctuary of noise and laughter, was a museum. Sarah's tall, slender silhouette was missing from the kitchen. Cody's high chair was still folded in the corner of the dining room, a dusty sentinel. Eli sat at his kitchen table, the laptop still open to Martha Kendall's witness statement. He hadn't slept in 36 hours, but he felt no fatigue. He was vibrating with a cold, pure energy that was equal parts rage and hope. Titan, sensing his handler's state, refused to settle. The K9 paced the length of the kitchen, his claws clicking on the tile, letting out low, anxious whines, his gaze fixed on Eli. "I know, buddy," Eli whispered, staring at a framed photo on the wall. Sarah and a 1-year-old Cody in a pumpkin patch. "I know, she saved him." Just as the first weak gray light of dawn began to filter through the snow-caked windows, his personal phone buzzed on the table. The screen read, "Mikey D." His heart leaped into his throat. He snatched the phone. "Talk to me." The voice on the other end was tinny, exhausted, and bewildered. "Eli, it's Mike. I ran the sample. Man, what the hell did you send me?" "Just read the results, Mike," Eli said, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. There was a rustle of paper. Okay. I ran the mitochondrial DNA sequence from the hair follicles against the profile I have on file for you, the one we use for K9 unit genetic database comparison. Eli, it's a 99.999% probability of direct paternal lineage. It's a match. Whoever this sample belongs to, it's your son, Eli. There's no scientific doubt. Where did you get this? Eli Thorne sank onto the floor, his back sliding down the kitchen cabinets, the phone pressed hard against his ear. The laptop screen glowed. The scar, Titan's protective instincts, the witness, and now the science. It wasn't grief, it wasn't a phantom, it wasn't a coincidence, it was real. The boy in that hospital bed, the silent, terrified child named Leo, was Cody Thorne. His son, who he had mourned, buried, and failed, was alive. "Mike," he said, his voice thick and unrecognizable, "I need you to burn the file. Erase the request. This never happened. You've never heard of this sample. I owe you my life. Do you understand?" "Yeah," Mike said, his voice suddenly all business. "I understand. I'm erasing it now. Be careful, Eli." The line clicked dead. Eli sat on the cold floor, his head in his hands. He didn't weep. The time for that was over. He was filled with a terrifying, righteous fire. He had a target, he had a victim, and he had a survivor to protect. He was just pushing himself to his feet, his mind racing with the next steps, moving Alistair, getting Cody, finding a lawyer, confronting him, when a heavy, confident knock echoed through the front door. Titan exploded. It was not a welcoming bark. It was a deep, chest-rattling, protective roar. The dog's hackles went up, his body instantly planting itself between Eli and the entrance. "Eli, hey, buddy, open up. It's Marcus." Rourke's voice was cheerful, muffled by the door. Eli froze. Here? Now? He moved to the door, his hand instinctively resting on the grip of his off-duty weapon. Titan was snarling, a low, ugly sound. "Titan, quiet," Eli commanded, his voice a low hiss. He looked through the peephole. There was Marcus Rourke, his stocky 45-year-old frame filling the lens. He was wearing a heavy black parka and jeans, his seen-it-all grin firmly in place. He was holding a large thermos and a white paper bag. The devil, bringing coffee. Eli schooled his features, burying the white-hot rage, pulling the familiar, threadbare cloak of the grieving widower back over his shoulders. He opened the door. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "Just checking on my partner," Rourke boomed, pushing past the snarling dog. "Whoa, T-Rex, easy. Damn, Eli, feed your animal." He stomped snow onto the entryway mat. "Heard you pulled a double. Figured you could use a pick-me-up. Brought donuts." Rourke walked, uninvited, into Eli's kitchen. The kitchen Sarah had designed, the kitchen where Cody had thrown his cereal on the floor. He placed the thermos on the counter. His dark, intelligent eyes swept the room, taking in the laptop, the photo on the wall, Eli's exhausted, haunted expression. "You didn't have to do that," Eli said, forcing his hands to stay unclenched at his sides. "Ah, it's nothing. Partners look out for each other, right?" Rourke poured 2 cups of coffee. He was playing the part of the concerned friend perfectly, but his eyes were sharp. He was assessing. "Rough night, huh? Finding that kid? Gotta, bring a lot of stuff back up." "Yeah," Eli said, taking the cup. "It did." "Listen, Eli," Rourke said, his tone shifting, becoming serious. He sat at Eli's table, a grotesque violation of the sacred space. "I'm worried about you. You look like hell, and I did some digging this morning. That's why I'm here." "Digging? On who?" "The kid, Leo, and the old man, Finch." Rourke took a sip of coffee. "The old man, certified paranoid schizophrenic. Got a history of delusions, minor vagrancy, total nut job. And the kid? He's not a mystery. He's a missing foster kid from up near Boulder. Ran away a week ago. Sad story, but he's not, he's not your kid, Eli." It was the lie. The perfectly crafted, plausible, disarming lie. Rourke was feeding him a false narrative, a dismissal. "It's just a foster kid, Eli. You're just projecting. Stand down." Eli had to play the part. He let his shoulders slump. "A foster kid? Oh, I didn't know." "Yeah, social services is already on it." Rourke leaned forward, his friendly mask slipping just enough to show the shark beneath. His voice dropped. "But that's not the real reason I'm here, Eli. The real reason is you, the Vipers. We never got the bastards who hit your family. You know that. They targeted you. They're still out there." He paused, letting the silence hang. "Now, you're off duty, poking around, getting personally involved with a missing kid, getting your name on reports, making noise. The Vipers, they don't like noise, Eli. They might think you're getting sloppy. They might think you're a liability they forgot to clean up." The threat was unmistakable. It was wrapped in a bow of concern, but it was a blade to the throat. Rourke was telling him, "Back off the boy, or I will finish what I started 3 years ago, and I will blame the vipers." Eli let his hand tremble, just slightly. He looked up, meeting Rourke's eyes, projecting the image of the broken, scared man Rourke wanted to see. I never thought of that, Marcus. My God. I'm just tired. I'm not thinking straight." Rourke smiled, his seen-it-all grin returning. He clapped Eli on the shoulder again. "That's what partners are for, to keep each other straight. Let the system handle the kid. You go get some sleep, take a sick day. We'll handle your route." He drained his coffee and walked to the door. "Stay safe, Eli, okay? People care about you." Rourke left. Eli locked the deadbolt. He stood with his back to the door, listening as Rourke's truck started and drove away. The mask of the victim dissolved, replaced by a face of pure, unadulterated fury. He looked at Titan, who was still standing at the kitchen entrance, the fur on his back rigid. "He knows," Eli whispered. "He knows we're close. He's scared." He grabbed his keys. "Let's go get your boy." Rourke's truck was barely out of sight before Eli was moving. The calculated, friendly threat had done the opposite of what Rourke intended. It hadn't scared Eli into submission. It had lit the final fuse. The vipers were Rourke's shield, the convenient boogeyman he used to keep Eli paralyzed by fear and grief. And he had just handed Eli the key. "He knows," Eli whispered, his voice a low growl. He grabbed his tactical go-bag from the hall closet, a standard-issue bag he kept packed with essentials. He checked his off-duty weapon, holstered it securely, and grabbed a fresh radio battery. Titan was already at the door, his body thrumming with his handler's focused rage. "Let's go, Ty. We're bringing him home." The blizzard was still raging, but Eli drove through it with a singular, terrifying focus. He was no longer a civilian. He was an operator. His mind was a cold, clean machine, processing threats. Threat 1, Rourke, internal, access to DPD systems, high danger. Threat 2, Viper's gang, unknown, possible secondary threat or total fabrication. Assume hostile. Threat 3, the hospital, soft target. Rourke knows they are there. He sped through the empty, snow-clogged streets, Titan silent and watchful in the passenger seat. He knew he couldn't take Cody to his own house. Rourke had just been there. It was compromised. He'd have to take them somewhere Rourke couldn't predict. He dialed Dr. Eva Ramirez at the hospital, his thumb tapping the screen. "Doctor, this is Officer Thorne. I'm inbound. I am moving both John Doe patients. Have their discharge papers ready for a transfer against medical advice. I want them at the ambulance bay exit in 10 minutes. "Officer, the man is still recovering." Eva's voice was sharp, professional. "I can't authorize." "You're not authorizing," Eli cut her off, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I am informing. I am their acting protector. The man who is hunting them is a police detective. He knows they are at your hospital. Get them ready, or I will arrest you for obstruction. 10 minutes. He hung up. He arrived at the Denver General Ambulance Bay, parking his K9 unit in the bay, blocking the exit. He entered the fourth-floor annex, Titan at his heel, his hand resting on his weapon. He found the room. Alistair Finch was sitting up in bed, dressed in scrubs, looking terrified. Cody was on the same bed, curled against Titan, who had apparently been left to guard them by the nurse. Dr. Ramirez was there, her arms crossed, her expression furious. Until she saw Eli's face. The haunted, grieving cop from last night was gone. This was a man of cold, hard angles, his green eyes burning with a dangerous light. "They're ready," she said, her anger fading into clinical concern. "He needs antibiotics. The boy needs a child psychologist. Where are you taking them?" "Somewhere safe," Eli said. He turned to Alistair, his voice softening just a fraction. "Mr. Finch, I'm Officer Thorne. I know what you saw 3 years ago. I know who you're running from. And I know who this boy is. His name is Cody. He's my son." Alistair's watery blue eyes widened, and he covered his mouth, a choked sob escaping him. I knew it. I knew he was special. I just wanted to keep him safe." "You did," Eli said, his voice thick. "You saved his life. Now I'm saving yours." He scooped Cody up into his arms. The boy, who had been silent and vacant, instinctively wrapped his arms around Eli's neck, his small body fitting against his father's chest as if he'd never left. The The feeling almost buckled Eli's knees, but he held firm. "Let's go. Titan, watch our six." They moved as a unit, Eli carrying Cody, Alistair shuffling beside him, and Titan walking backward behind them, his gaze fixed on the hallway. As they waited for the elevator, a young nurse ran up, holding a small stack of papers. "Officer, you forgot these," she said out of breath. The boy, he was drawing. We gave him some crayons. I thought you might want them." Eli, his arms full of his son, just nodded. The nurse, a kind-looking woman in her 20s with bright pink highlights in her hair, tucked the papers into the outer pocket of Eli's go bag. "He's a sweet boy," she said, smiling at Cody. "He loves your dog." The elevator arrived. "Thank you," Eli said, and the doors closed. He drove them not to his house, but to a DPD safe house, a small, nondescript apartment in a quiet suburban complex, one whose location was known only to K-9 handlers and a few trusted internal affairs officers. Officers Eli knew for a fact despised Rourke. He settled them inside. Alistair, exhausted and overwhelmed, immediately fell asleep on the sofa. Cody, however, was wired. He followed Eli from room to room, his small hand clutching the back of Eli's pants, his eyes wide. Titan never left his side. Eli, needing a moment to process, sat at the cheap dining table and pulled the nurse's stack of papers from his bag. He stared at the first drawing. It was just a child's scribble, lines of red and black. He flipped to the next, and the next. Then he stopped. His blood ran cold. It was a drawing, not a scribble. It was crude, drawn with the shaky hand of a 5-year-old, but it was horrifyingly specific. On the left, a huge splash of orange and red crayon. Fire. In the center, a stocky round figure drawn in black, with a wide, angry red line for a mouth, the bad man. On the right, a tiny stick figure, himself, and above him, a figure with long, streaming yellow crayon hair. Mommy. And next to her, a large black shape with pointed ears. The dog. Eli stared, confused. Titan wasn't there. His memory was fragmented, merged. He was remembering the fire, Rourke, and Sarah. And he was blending it with the present, with Titan, his new protector. He was remembering his mother. She was there. She was fighting. The drawing was Cody's first testimony. Rourke's threat echoed in his head. The vipers. They don't like noise. It was a clue. Rourke was arrogant. He believed his viper's story was the perfect cover. Eli's mind, now sharp, made the connection. If Rourke used the vipers as a cover, he would have planted rumors, some kind of digital breadcrumb, to make the lie plausible in case anyone ever looked. But the witness, Martha, had mentioned a lady in a dark coat. Sarah. She had handed Cody off. She had saved him. But who was this lady? A third party? Or was it... No, he couldn't go there. He had to assume Sarah was gone, a victim who had fought back in her final moments. He had to find the woman who had run with his son. He sat at the laptop, his hands flying. He couldn't use DPD systems. Rourke was watching. He opened a secure Tor browser, navigating to a deep web forum he used to monitor for gang chatter and whistleblower leaks. The air in the safe house was still, the only sound the soft breathing of Alistair. Almar and the occasional click of Titan's claws on the floor. Eli's fingers typed in the keywords. Summit View Fire. Vipers. Rourke. Nothing. Just static. He paused. What if the message wasn't about the vipers? What if the vipers were just the distraction? He thought about the drawing. Mommy. He thought about Martha Kendall's statement. She gave the child to another person. He typed in a new set of keywords. Sarah Thorne. Cody. Refuge, a single hit, a post from 2.5 years ago, buried in an archive, from a user named Persephone, a name Sarah, a classics major, had always loved. Eli's heart stopped. The message was simple, not code, but a desperate, anonymous plea to the digital void. I'm trying to find a home for the son. The father thinks he's dead. The father is being watched by the shark who swims in his own tank. I can't go back. The shark thinks I'm dead too. I gave the boy to a kind man. I am watching from the ashes. Eli read it once, twice, a third time. The shark who swims in his own tank. A cop. Rourke. The father thinks he's dead. Him. I can't go back. The shark thinks I'm dead too. The words on the screen blurred. I'm dead too. The message wasn't from the lady in the dark coat, it was from Sarah herself. He had been so blinded by the explosion, by Rourke's lies, by the fact of the funeral, that he had never considered the impossible. The witness, Martha, hadn't seen Sarah die. She had seen her hand Cody off. She had seen her fight, but she had not seen her die. He looked at the drawing, the yellow-haired figure. Mommy. It wasn't just a memory, it was a survivor. Sarah was alive. Eli Thorne stared at the glowing screen, the words, "The shark thinks I'm dead too," burning into his retinas. The safe house was silent, save for the whistling wind outside and the soft breathing of Alistair and Cody in the next room. Sarah. She was alive. The concept was too vast, too seismic. It wasn't just that his son was alive. His entire world, the very foundation of his grief, was a lie. He looked at Cody's drawing again, the yellow-haired figure. It wasn't a memory of a victim, it was the icon of a survivor. He forced his mind to work, to push past the tidal wave of emotion. He was a cop. He had a lead. Persephone. The forum post was 2.5 years old. Replying was useless, but Persephone had logged in. She had created the post. She had left a digital footprint. Eli's fingers, steady now, moved over the laptop keyboard, his deep web browser navigating the encrypted layers. He wasn't just a K9 handler, he was a former cybercrimes investigator, a skill he'd let atrophy in his grief. He ran the user's signature. It was routed through a dozen proxies, bounced off satellites, a ghost in the machine. But she had been sloppy once, years ago, linking this account to a throwaway email for a simple online game. The account was dead. But the username, Persephone91, he cross-referenced it. Nothing. He tried another. Hades found her. Nothing. He paused. What would she do? She was hiding from a cop. She would need a secure, anonymous way to communicate, but one she could check. He found it. A different forum, this one for urban explorers and conspiracy theorists, people who discussed shadow government and deep state cover-ups. A user named ST Refuge had made one post, just 6 months ago. The post was simple, looking for info on DPD corruption, specifically the Vipers and the Summit View file. Anyone know if the shark is still swimming? The shark. It was her. This was recent. She was still digging. She was still fighting. Eli's hands trembled. He created a new anonymous account. He opened a direct message. He had one chance to send a signal that wouldn't be mistaken for a threat, something only he would know. He typed, his throat tight. I saw the drawing, the man in the fire, the yellow hair, and I found him. The scar is the same. He is safe with me, but the shark is hunting him. I need you. He hit send. The silence that followed was the loudest sound he had ever heard. He sat, staring at the screen, every minute stretching into an agonizing hour. Alistair coughed in his sleep. Cody murmured, "Mommy," and then went quiet. Titan, who had been resting his head on Eli's boot, suddenly stood, his gaze fixed on the laptop, as if he could sense the digital tension. And then the screen refreshed. One new message. It was not a sentence. It was a location, a time, and a threat. The abandoned carousel, City Park, midnight, come alone, no badge, no K9. If I see the dog, I run. Midnight. It was 10 p.m. He had 2 hours. This was insane. It broke every rule of officer safety. Going to a tertiary location, alone, unarmed, she said no badge, which implied no gun, in the middle of a blizzard to meet a ghost. It was a classic trap. It could be Rourke, having found her account, baiting him. But the drawing, the scar, he had to go. He looked at Cody, sleeping soundly for the first time in years, Alistair frail on the couch, and Titan, his partner, his shadow. She said no K9. This was the hardest part. He knelt, burying his face in Titan's ruff. I'm sorry, buddy. You have to stay. You have to guard him. This one. I have to do this alone. Titan whined, a low, painful sound, licking the side of Eli's face. He understood the command, but he hated it. Eli left the safe house, a ghost stepping out into a world of white. He drove his personal vehicle, not the K9 unit, parking blocks away from City Park. The park itself was a void, the blizzard having erased all trails, the trees' skeletal arms draped in ice. He walked, the snow crunching under his boots, the wind tearing the breath from his lungs. In the center of the park, he saw it, the carousel, a dark, silent skeletal circle. its painted horses covered in snow, their faces grotesque in the dim emergency lighting. It was a place of dead childhoods. He stood by the entrance, exposed, freezing, his hand resting on the off-duty weapon concealed under his parka, violating her order. He would not come unprepared. He waited. 11:59 p.m. 12 a.m., 12:01 a.m., nothing but the howl of the wind. It's a trap. Rourke was going to... A shadow detached itself from the trees. It didn't look human. It was small, hunched, moving with a quick, paranoid gait, slipping between the frozen benches, circling him. Eli stood perfectly still, his hands visible. The figure stopped 20 feet away, a black shape against the snow. Eli. The voice. It was a low, rough rasp, like sandpaper and rust. It was a voice he didn't know. "Persephone," he called back, his heart pounding. The figure stepped forward into the weak pool of light. The hood of the parka fell back. He was looking at a stranger, a gaunt, haunted woman who looked to be in her late 40s. Her hair was a choppy, terrible mess, dyed a flat, chemical brown. She was thin, painfully thin, and her eyes were the only familiar thing. They were Sarah's eyes, but stripped of all their light, filled instead with a feral, hunted energy. "Sarah," he whispered, the name a raw wound. The left side of her face was a ruin, a spider web of pale, silver scar tissue pulled at the corner of her eye, and her mouth, the telltale melted wax texture of a severe burn. This was not the woman who smelled of vanilla. This was a warrior forged in fire and ice. "You weren't supposed to find me," she rasped, her gaze darting past him, checking the trees. "You were supposed to stay grieving. It was safer." "He's alive," Eli said, taking a step. She flinched, her hand darting inside her coat. "He stopped. Our son, Sarah. I found him. He's alive." "I know," she breathed, and for the first time a flicker of the woman he knew passed through her eyes, a wave of agonizing love. "I've been watching him from a distance. Alistair was a good man. I chose him. I saw him at the bus station. He looked kind. I couldn't." "What happened, Sarah? Rourke?" The name made her lip curl, the scar tissue pulling her mouth into a snarl. "Rourke," she hissed. "It wasn't the Vipers. It was him. He was on their payroll. He owed them. Gambling. He was funneling them intel. Your investigation was getting too close to him. The explosion, it was meant for you, Eli. That night. He was going to kill you, blame the Vipers, and close his own case file. But you switched shifts." Eli's blood ran cold. He was at my house this morning. "He knows," she said, her eyes widening in new terror. "He knows you found the boy." She held up a hand. "Let me finish. When you switched shifts, Rourke panicked. He went to the house to destroy your files, but I was there. I'd just put Cody to bed. He tried to make it look like a murder-suicide. I fought him." Her hand went to her scarred face. "I grabbed Cody and I ran. I saw Martha, the homeless woman, and a young woman she was with. I shoved Cody into the stranger's arms and screamed at her to run. Rourke caught me. He dragged me back toward the house as the timers... God, the gas! It went off." She looked away, remembering the fire. "He threw me, Eli, like trash. He thought the fire would take care of me. He left me to burn, but I crawled. I crawled into the storm drain, the same one you found Cody in. I was on fire." She was weeping now, silent, angry tears. "The woman I gave Cody to, Rourke found her. He killed her. That was the body in the morgue, Eli, the one they presumptively identified as me. Rourke filed the dental records himself. He closed the case. He made me a ghost, and I stayed one. It was the only way. If he knew I was alive, he would never stop hunting me, and he would never stop hunting our son." Eli stared at her, this impossible, broken, ferocious woman. His wife. She had endured 3 years of hell, hiding in the shadows, scarred, alone, watching her own son be raised by a stranger, all to protect him. "Sarah," he said, and he finally closed the distance, his arms wrapping around her thin, trembling body. She felt like a bird, a fragile thing of sharp bones and fierce energy. She resisted for a second, then collapsed against him, a single agonizing sob breaking from her chest. "He's at a safe house," Eli whispered into her hair. "He's with Titan. I'm bringing you home, Sarah. I'm bringing you both home. No, she said, pulling back, her eyes suddenly hard again. You can't. He's hunting you now. If he knows you have Cody, he won't use threats. He'll use bullets. The trap isn't for me anymore, Eli. It's for you. Eli's arms tightened around Sarah, pulling her reality against his, a desperate, anchoring gesture in the middle of the frozen park. The wind howled around the silent, snow-covered carousel, a symphony of their shared desolation. Her words hung in the air, colder than the ice on his face. The trap isn't for me anymore, Eli. It's for you. He processed this, the tactical, logical part of his mind, the part Rourke had so carefully lulled to sleep, was now screaming. He doesn't know you're alive, Eli said, his voice low, urgent. He knows I found Cody. He knows I moved him and Alistair. He came to my house. He threatened me. He thinks I'm a broken widower, scared of the vipers. Sarah pulled back, her scarred, feral eyes scanning the darkness, a hunter who couldn't rest. That was before. Now he'll be desperate. He'll assume you know something. He'll check the hospital. He'll check the morgue. He'll realize the body he planted isn't mine. He'll know I'm out there. We have to run, Eli. My way. Disappear. No, Eli said. The word was absolute. A stone dropped into a frozen lake. No more running. Not when I have him. He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. He's 5 years old, Sarah. He's alive. He's our son. We are not running. We are ending this. You don't know what he's capable of, she hissed, panicked. And he doesn't know what I'm capable of, Eli countered, his voice a low, cold fury. He doesn't know you're alive. He doesn't know I have the original witness report. He doesn't know I have a DNA confirmation. And he doesn't know that our son is the final witness. I'm taking you to the safe house. I'm taking you to Cody. The fight drained from her, replaced by a devastating, fragile hope. Cody, she whispered, the name a foreign, precious sound. He's safe? He's with Titan. Let's go. The journey back was a tactical nightmare. They moved through alleys and shadows, avoiding main roads, Eli's hand never leaving his weapon, Sarah moving like a phantom, her head on a constant swivel. When they reached the nondescript apartment building, Eli entered the code. Titan did not bark. He met them at the door, his body a rigid, silent question, his gaze locking onto the stranger behind his handler. The dog let out a single low whine, smelling Eli's scent on her, smelling the faint, familiar trace of a family long dead. It's okay, Ty, Eli said, his voice thick. It's her. She's home. Alistair Finch was awake, sitting on the edge of the cheap sofa, his face etched with terror. Officer, he stammered. I heard a noise. It's okay, Alistair, you're safe. And then Sarah saw him. On the sofa, buried under a pile of blankets, was Cody. He was asleep, his small face peaceful, his dark hair falling over his forehead. Sarah stopped breathing. The scarred, hardened warrior who had survived fire and 3 years of icy hell simply broke. Her legs buckled. Eli caught her, but she pushed him away, crawling at the last few feet. She reached out a trembling, scarred hand, her fingers hovering over his cheek, afraid to touch him, afraid he would dissolve. Oh, God, she wept, silent, agonizing sobs shaking her thin frame. Cody, my baby. The boy stirred. His eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the dim light. He saw the strange woman, her face twisted by shadows and scars. He didn't see his mother. He saw a stranger, and he flinched, scrambling backward. It's okay, Sarah choked out, pulling her hand back, the rejection a fresh, sharp wound. It's okay, baby. I'm... Before she could finish, Eli's personal phone, the one Rourke had called that morning, vibrated on his belt. It wasn't a text. It was a call from Marcus Rourke. Eli's blood turned to ice. He held up a hand for silence, his eyes locking with Sarah's. He answered. Thorn. Eli. Rourke's voice was no longer friendly. It was flat, cold, and stripped of all pretense. The shark was no longer smiling. You've had a very, very busy night. I gave you the courtesy of a warning. You chose to ignore it. Now, you've made me reckless. What do you want, Marcus? I'm at the hospital. Denver General. You know, that cute nurse who helped you? Jenna, pink hair. She's been so helpful telling me about the drawings your John Doe was making. Really, just a model employee. Eli's stomach dropped. If you touch her, Marcus, she's fine. For now, Rourke said, his voice casual, as if discussing the weather. But she's clumsy. She's standing right near the fourth-floor stairwell. It'd be a tragedy if she tripped. A real tragedy. The trap was sprung. Eli looked at Sarah, her face white with terror. What's the trade? You, Sarah. Yes, I know she's alive, Eli. I'm not stupid. And the boy. Plus, whatever evidence she's been hoarding, you bring them all to me. In exchange, the nurse goes home. Simple. Where? The old tannery warehouse, Pier 4, South Platte, midnight. That gives you 1 hour. And Eli? Come alone. No cops, no SWAT, no radio, and if I smell that damn dog, Jenna flies. Am I clear? Rourke hung up. The silence in the room was absolute. Alistair was shaking. Sarah was staring at Eli, her eyes wide. He'll kill us all, Eli. He'll kill the nurse. He'll kill us. He'll kill Cody. It's a slaughter. Yes, Eli said, his voice dangerously calm. It's a slaughter, but it's his trap, set on his terms, which means he feels safe, and that means he's exposed. He pulled his DPD-issued phone from his bag, opened his photo gallery, and found his department headshot. He knelt in front of Cody, who was still huddled on the couch. Cody, he said, his voice gentle, I need you to look at a picture. It's very important. Do you know this man? He turned the screen. Cody looked at the smiling, stocky, dark-eyed photo of Detective Marcus Rourke. The boy's face, which had been confused and sleepy, crumpled into a mask of pure primal terror. He let out a sound that ripped through the room, his first words. In 3 years, a choked, terrified scream. No! Bad man! Fireman! No! 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 He scrambled backward, knocking the phone away, his small body shaking violently. Sarah rushed to him, but Cody screamed again, terrified of her scarred face. Alistair, finally understanding, stepped forward. It's okay, Leo. It's okay, son. He put his arms around the trembling boy. Eli stood up, his face carved from ice. He had it, the final piece, the victim's testimony. He grabbed a burner phone from his go bag. He couldn't trust DPD. He couldn't trust dispatch. He dialed the one man in the department who was untouchable, the one man who hated Rourke more than anyone. Captain Miller, he said. This is Miller. The voice was gravel, no nonsense. Captain Frank Miller was the head of internal affairs, a 50-year-old man with a reputation as a bulldog, graying hair, and sharp, suspicious eyes that saw corruption everywhere. He'd been trying to build a case on Rourke for years. This is Officer Thorne, sir. I have a Code 10 emergency. Officer involved, Detective Marcus Rourke. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Thorne, I've been waiting for this call for 5 years. Talk to me. Rourke is active. He's holding a civilian hostage at Denver General, and he's baiting me into a secondary location. Pier 4, the old tannery. He's expecting me, my wife, who he listed as deceased 3 years ago, and my son. He's coming to execute us all. God, Miller whispered, what do you need? A perimeter. A ghost perimeter. Thermal, snipers, full SWAT, but silent approach. Rourke sees anything, the hostage, Nurse Jenna, dies. He's expecting me at midnight. I need your team in place by 23:45. Done. What about you? Eli looked at Sarah, who was watching him, her feral fear being replaced by his cold resolve. He looked at Titan, who was standing, his muscles bunched, ready. He's expecting me and Sarah. We're going in, but we're not going in alone. The dog? Miller asked. He said if he smells the dog. He's expecting a K9 handler, Eli said, a grim smile touching his lips. He's not expecting a ghost. Titan is silent. He's trained for off-leash, silent apprehension. Rourke won't know he's there until it's too late. It's your play, Thorne. Godspeed. Eli hung up. He turned to Sarah. You don't have to do this. I can go alone. Sarah stood up, the scar on her face stark. She looked at Cody, who was sobbing in Alistair's arms. He tried to burn me, Eli. He tried to take my son. I am not hiding in the shadows while you fight my war. She walked to the go bag and pulled out Eli's backup weapon, checking the magazine with practiced hands. I started this. I'm damn well finishing it. The air in the safe house was electric, thick with the silence of 3 lives balanced on the edge of a knife. Alistair Finch, his frail body rigid with a newfound protective purpose, took the burner phone from Eli. "Captain Frank Miller," Eli said, his voice a low, steady command. "His line is open. We are leaving now. If you do not hear from me or see us return in 90 minutes, you call him. You tell him Pier 4. You tell him Rourke. Do you understand?" Alistair nodded, his watery blue eyes clear for the first time. "I understand. I will protect the boy." Sarah moved to the couch. Cody, having cried himself back into an exhausted, fitful sleep, was oblivious. She knelt, her scarred hand hovering over his face, a mirror of the moment she'd first seen him. She forced herself to touch his hair, a feather-light brush. "Mommy has to go, baby," she whispered, the words tearing at her throat. "Mommy has to go finish the nightmare. Then we're never running again." She kissed her fingers and pressed them to his forehead. The boy flinched in his sleep, but didn't wake. That small rejection was all the fuel Sarah needed. She stood, her face a mask of cold resolve, and slid the backup weapon into the waistband at the small of her back, hidden by her dark parka. "Let's go." Eli looked at Titan. The dog was vibrating, a coiled spring of muscle and instinct, his amber eyes locked on his handler, awaiting the command. "With me, Ty," Eli said. "Quiet." The three of them, the broken cop, the resurrected ghost, and the silent wolf, slipped out of the apartment and into the howl of the blizzard, a trinity of vengeance. The drive to the South Platte River was a silent, high-stakes crawl. The snow was their cover, the city's chaos their distraction. They abandoned Eli's truck, half a mile from the pier, the wind instantly beginning to bury their tracks. The old tannery at Pier 4 was a brick and steel skeleton looming against the dark, churning river, isolated and dead. From a black, unmarked van parked 3 blocks away, Captain Frank Miller, his bulldog face illuminated by the green glow of a monitor, watched. "I have them," a sniper's voice crackled in his ear. "Thermal shows 3 targets on the catwalk. 1 stationary at the east pillar, that's the hostage. I have 2 unknowns, ex-military, by their stance. Rourke is armed." Miller keyed his mic. "Thorne is approaching on foot from the south. Hold your fire. Wait for his signal or mine. We take them alive if possible. We take them down if they breathe wrong." Eli, Sarah, and Titan moved along the frozen riverbank. The chemical stench of the old tannery, a sour smell of decay, hit them. It was perfect. "He said if he smells the dog," Eli whispered, his breath pluming. "The wind is in our favor. This place smells worse than a kennel." He unclipped Titan's leash. He didn't give a verbal command. He gave a series of silent hand signals: circle, flank, silent. Titan seemed to melt into the shadows, a 90-pound sable phantom, using the discarded machinery as cover, moving toward the warehouse's open loading bay from the opposite angle. Eli and Sarah approached the main entrance. "He's expecting us to be terrified," Eli murmured, checking his weapon. "We are not." They stepped inside. The warehouse was cavernous, a cathedral of rust and shadow. High above, narrow catwalks crisscrossed the darkness. A single harsh floodlight snapped on, blinding them. "Right on time, partners!" Rourke's voice boomed, echoing off the steel vats. He stood on the central catwalk, silhouetted, his stocky, 45-year-old frame radiating smug confidence. "I do love it when the trash takes itself out." Below him, at the base of a massive support pillar, Nurse Jenna was tied to a chair. Her pink-streaked hair was matted, her face stained with tears. She was gagged, her eyes wide with terror when she saw Eli. Rourke was not alone. 2 men stood near him, not in DPD uniforms. They were hard-bodied, dressed in black tactical gear, armed with short-barreled rifles. Mercenaries. The Vipers were just a paycheck. "Jenna is fine," Rourke called down, his voice dripping with false concern. "Just cold. Now, the evidence. Sarah, you've been a busy little ghost. I want the laptop. I want every file. Put it in the drum." He pointed to an empty 55-gallon oil drum in the center of the floor. Sarah held up a small, slim laptop bag she'd carried. "It's all here, Marcus. Everything." "Toss it," he commanded. Sarah stepped forward and threw the bag. It skidded across the concrete floor, stopping near the drum. One of the mercenaries moved to retrieve it, his rifle still trained on Eli. Rourke laughed, a short, ugly sound. "You see, this is what happens, Eli. You get emotional. You had to be a hero, had to save the kid. And now, you brought me my son and my wife. All my loose ends, right here." He raised his pistol, aiming it not at Eli, but directly at Sarah. You were always the problem, Sarah. Too smart, too nosy, should have stayed dead. Eli didn't yell. He didn't move. He simply put 2 fingers to his lips and blew, a high-frequency whistle that the human ear could barely register. But to Titan, it was a thunderclap. Rourke was focused on Sarah. The mercs were focused on Eli and the bag. None of them were watching the deep shadows to their right. It was a fatal mistake. Titan, who had flanked them in perfect silence, exploded from behind a stack of rotted pallets. He was not a dog. He was a weapon. He launched himself, a silent missile of fur and muscle, at the first mercenary, the one closest to Jenna. He hit the man's side, his jaws locking onto the man's gun arm. The rifle discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as the man screamed, falling backward, his arm shattering. "Now, Frank!" Eli roared. In the same instant, the world erupted. SWAT floodlights from outside the building blasted through the high windows, illuminating the warehouse like a stadium. "Denver police! Hands up!" Captain Miller's voice boomed over a loudspeaker. A half-dozen red sniper dots painted the chest of the second mercenary. He froze, dropping his rifle, hands shooting into the air. Rourke, his face a mask of disbelief and rage, grabbed Jenna, hauling her from the chair and putting his pistol to her head. "Back off! Back off, Miller, or I swear to God she dies." "It's over, Marcus," Eli yelled, his gun trained on him, Sarah taking cover behind a pillar. "We have the witness, Martha Kendall. We have the DNA, and we have the victim's testimony. Cody, he remembers you, Marcus. He remembers the fire." Rourke's composure snapped. The seen-it-all grin was gone, replaced by the snarl of a cornered animal. "He owed me, the Viper leader. I buried his cases. He couldn't pay. So I was taking what I was owed, your files, your life. You just wouldn't stop digging." He shoved Jenna hard to the concrete floor, and, in one fluid, desperate motion, raised his gun, not at the SWAT officers, but at Sarah. "If I'm going down, I'm finishing the job." He fired. The gunshot was deafening. Eli, moving with pure instinct, shoved Sarah, tackling her behind the pillar. The bullet sparked, ricocheting off the steel where she had been standing. Eli rose, leveling his weapon, firing twice. Crack, crack. Both shots hit Rourke's center mass in his heavy parka. The vest stopped them, but the impact sent him staggering back. He cursed, leveling his own gun, his eyes wide with hate, preparing for the killing shot on Eli. He never got the chance. Titan, having released the first mercenary, streaked across the 30-foot gap. Rourke saw the sable blur too late. The dog leaped, his jaws clamping down not on the arm, but on Rourke's throat. Rourke screamed, a high, choked, gurgling sound, as he fell backward off the low catwalk, crashing to the concrete below, the dog still attached. "Titan! AUS! Out!" Eli screamed, running forward. The dog immediately released, his muzzle dark. Rourke wasn't dead, but he was finished. He lay gasping, clutching his throat, as SWAT officers swarmed him, cuffing his hands. It was over. Sarah rushed to Jenna, cutting her binds. Captain Miller, his bulldog face grim, stood over Rourke. "Marcus Rourke, you are under arrest for the murder of Sarah Thorne. Or, I guess, for attempted murder. And about 20 other things." Eli holstered his weapon, his body shaking with adrenaline. He walked to his partner. Titan sat panting, his amber eyes bright. Eli knelt, burying his face in the dog's thick ruff. "Good boy," he whispered. "Good boy." Across the warehouse, amid the flashing blue and red lights, his eyes met Sarah's. The ghost who had walked out of the fire and the man who had lived in the ashes were finally free. For 3 years, Officer Eli's world was a frozen grave. He thought God had abandoned him. But God never leaves us. He sends miracles in unexpected forms. Sometimes, a miracle is the unwavering loyalty of a K9 partner like Titan, who can smell the truth through years of deception. Sometimes, it's the quiet courage of a kind stranger like Alistair, or the incredible strength God gives a mother like Sarah, allowing her to survive fire and fight from the shadows. Their family was shattered by evil, but rebuilt by faith. In your own life, you may feel lost in a snowstorm. This story is a reminder that hope is never wasted. What are your thoughts? Please share your own story of hope in the comments below. We read every one. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel so we can continue bringing you messages of faith. May God bless you and your family, and may He always send you a loyal Titan to guide you when you feel lost. We'll see you in the next story.